Hi everyone. I just want to start off by apologizing for not being able to make it to class today. I'm working the Tampa Bay Rays Fan Fest, which goes all day from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So again, really sorry I couldn't make it to class, but I appreciate you taking the time to watch my presentation and definitely appreciate any feedback in advance. So before we get started into the site, if you guys want to maybe click the link to the PDF that's in the comments or description of the video, that's probably a better way to do this, and you can just listen as I kind of guide you through this. I think it'll be higher quality that way. So let's go ahead and start with the fundamentals of the site. I used a light gray background throughout the site, and it's got some texture to it that kind of reminds me of like an ashy look. And it reminds me of, ashed over charcoal, which is clearly a theme of the site. But it also helps a lot of the darker elements of the entire site just pop. And there's a lot of dark imagery. You can see that the main paragraph text is black, the headlines are on a black background, and again, I just think this light gray background helps with that a lot. So now let's go look at the top of the page with the navigation font. That's consistent throughout, and I use Gotham Bold there, and that's the font that I use for the logo itself. And I was going to use that for all the headlines as well, but as I started to do it, it was too boring for me. So for the headlines, I used something with a little bit more character. It's the font Anton. And so I didn't want to completely abandon the Gotham font. So what I did was use that as some of the sub-headlines, Gotham Bold, and then the paragraph font is actually Gotham Book. So as far as the layout of the site, I used the 12 grid 960 system, and I ended up using the left side utilizes 8 columns, and then the sidebar on the right side uses 4 columns, and that's very consistent throughout, except for the slider on the home page. But if you go down to the bottom of the page, you can see the footer down there, and I really don't like unnecessarily large footers. So what I did here was just use the basics of the site. I had the navigation again because some of the pages are quite long. So, navigation, social media icons, tiny copyright, and that's it. And obviously it's black and gray to kind of decipher the footer from the rest of the site. So let's go ahead and look at this main home page, the index page, going back up to the top. It starts out with a very nice slider up at the top, takes over the page, it's very dominant. And again, for a little bit more character to the site, I didn't want to use just a normal border. So I used this kind of white, like charred edged border, and I think this, again, looks really good, gives the site some character, and just kind of helps draw attention to some of the main elements of the site. And the slider will slide through the basics, the recipes, and the shop, and again, those are kind of the main things I want people to pay attention to. But moving down, you can see the recipe of the week is featured prominently, and then we have the catering services, new shirts, more recipes under that, and you can go over to the sidebar, you see the Meet the Chef, which is kind of a link to the About page, and then tweets. So the Twitter sidebar is featured throughout, and that really is dedicated towards my target audience, the 18 to 34-year-olds, which is the most active demographic on Twitter. And it's just kind of all tied together here. Everything throughout the site is linked somewhere on this home page. So just getting a really good feel for what the entire page is all about. And then if you look under there at the more recipes, you can see what a link looks like when it's hovered over. So obviously it gets the underline, and I think it's really easy to decipher. So let's move on to the basics page. So here we have the headline at the top. It's got a little blurb under that to tell people what the page is all about. And I did have another slider here that is just kind of drawing attention to what the basics are all about. This one's about lighting a charcoal grill. And the slider gets a little smaller here because I didn't want it to take up too much. I'm ready to get into each page's regular content, and we'll just move on from there as far as no need to have like the big slider up at the top. But you can see here that like the thumbnail is highlighted, and basically what will happen is when each one slides through, or as the user slides through it, it'll highlight each individual basic. And you can see that the headlines underneath each thumbnail are a link, so they can either click the image in the middle of the slider, or they can click the image on the thumbnail, or they can click the link. Plenty of options to get to each basic. And then you can see the recipe of the week actually became a sidebar element here, just a little bit smaller, but something that I don't want people to forget about, that obviously we are recipes as well. And then finally you have the Twitter again. So Moving on to an individual basic, an example of that. So here's what it would look like if you actually clicked into lighting a charcoal grill. And you have the nice image there, a little blurb underneath the headline, and then goes into what you'll actually need to complete this task. It has a rating system there, and this is, you'll see shortly that recipes look a lot like this. And I feel like, rating how useful a basic is or how, good a recipe is definitely a crucial part of any kind of like recipe or cooking site. So moving underneath the what you'll need, you see that each step has its own picture. And again, this was kind of one of my goals for starting this company. Felt like a lot of cooking sites just didn't have the imagery that they should. Like, yeah, it's great to read about this stuff, but it really helps to be able to see it too. And eventually a lot of these will have video, but each one having a picture that you can pretty easily tell from the thumbnail what's going on, but you can see that they have little magnifying glasses there too that will easily be able to have expandable, and you'll be able to see the image much larger if you need to. So steps go all the way down. The sidebar content is pretty consistent throughout. You got Meet the Chef, Recipe of the Week, and Twitter again. And let's move on to the recipes page. So again, you got the headline at the top, a little blurb right underneath that. You got the smaller slider again that's got featured recipes, and for now I'm gonna, I only have 5 recipes, so I'm not gonna individualize each one as far as like I don't want a beef category and a chicken category and a pork category. It flows much better right now with it just having each individual recipe together. So eventually I would like to split it up like that, and then the slider would become like a featured recipes type deal where I'd have 1 pork and 1 beef, things like that. But for now it's very similar to the basic section where it'll slide through and highlight which thing is being featured. And then you can still click on the link or click on the image or however way you want to get to it. There's plenty of ways to do that. So moving on to an individual recipe, again you can see this is a lot like an individual basic where we have the headline up there, a little blurb about it, and then a little bit different from the basics, we have like the total time for cooking, the prep time, inactive, cook, things like that. And what you'll need changes to ingredients, which is pretty standard. And there's your rating system again. Go through each one of your steps, nice clear pictures that are expandable if necessary. Links throughout that, things like lighting a charcoal grill was step number 2. You can go ahead and link to that if you need more information than what's actually here. Same with step number 4. You can see there's a link to the grilling chart if they have bigger steaks or different kind of steaks or things like that. So let's go ahead and go to the shop. So the shop changes a bit from the previous 2 pages, and it features a featured product that's not a slider. It's the same size, but it's just one featured product that I want people to pay attention to. And then the sidebar changes too, where here's your shop categories, and this will make more sense when we get into the next page. But going down underneath the featured product, here I did have individual categories which are split up into apparel, rubs, and utensils. And by the time I actually completely build the site out, I do want to fill these up a little bit more, at least have 3 on each category. But let's go ahead and look at the individual product itself. And you can see that it's a little bit different from the recipes and basics, where you got the headline, the price. For the shirt, they'll select their size. Obviously, this will go away for things like rubs and utensils. And then the Add to Cart button. Now, the button here is featured as one that's hovered over. So a normal one is just black, and when it's hovered over, it turns gray. And then underneath the picture of the product itself, you have your description of it, and then you have some ratings and reviews. And again, I think this is just kind of a very standard part of having a product page, ratings and reviews, but everything's nice and spaced out and really easy to read. And again, so here's your shop categories on the right, where now you're into the shop itself if you want to get back out and just go look at the rubs or look at the utensils instead of where you're at, then it's very easy to get back out to that. So let's go to the catering page, and the catering page is the specialized form for the site. So what I want to do is offer catering services to the state of Florida, and you can read about this a little bit here, but basically users will have 2 options, and there's the price there with them. Option 1, they can choose 1 meat and 2 sides, and it'll serve up to 15 people. And option 2, they can choose 2 meats and 3 sides, and it'll be pretty easy for them to pick which ones they want and fill out the form. So what they'll do is they'll do the name, email, phone's optional, because I know that's definitely something people don't like to do, is give out their phone number. And then they'll go ahead and have their drop-down menus here. And so they'll choose their option, and then they can choose their meat and choose their sides. Now, what I want to do possibly is change how they actually choose their meats and choose their sides. You can see here, and this is kind of a standard thing with forms, is you hold control for multiple choices or command on Mac. This kind of takes away from the mobile part of it. So if I want this form to work on a mobile site, obviously there's no control or command. So I may change this so, like, let's say they choose option 1, and it'll just have them pick 1 meat, and then the sides part will actually become 2 separate drop downs, and they can pick their 2 sides from there. Same with if they were to choose option 2, it would become 2 meats, 3 sides, and then they can go ahead and choose as they will. So I haven't quite decided how I'm going to do this yet, but I'm kind of leaning towards that, as it becoming more drop-down menus, and that'll also give them the opportunity to choose more than one, or they can actually choose the same meat. So if they wanted double burgers, they could choose burgers, and go from there. Or same with like the sides. If they just want to load up on mac and cheese 3 times, and then they can go. But obviously, this wouldn't be like a deadlock thing. I would certainly want to talk to the people before we actually process the order and set the date and everything. But it is an option for sure. So moving on to the last page, this is the About page. And this is just an extended version of the Meet the Chef page that we saw earlier, or the little sidebar element. And it's just more extended information. It's spaced out nice and not too long, but it just gives a good personality to the site as far as who founded it, me, and all the information as far as why and what I expect this to become. So that's it for me. I again really appreciate everyone listening, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend.